My guest today is Billy Broas. Billy is the founder of Linchpin Media, LLC. He is a message and strategist and marketing educator and the author of the book, Simple Marketing for Smart People. Fun fact, Billy is a certified beer judge, which we will get into, of course, because it sounds hysterical. So today we are going to be diving into a lot of the principles in his book, including why do business owners who are good at what they do struggle with marketing? Why is it important to develop a core marketing message? And in his experience, I'm going to ask him what he has found that does not work. Let's jump right in. Okay, Billy, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk to you. This is going to be great.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for the invite, Linda.
Yeah, I have so many questions for you that I don't want to just jump into everything. But one of the first questions is I always try to start with something kind of fun because people like to know you as like a human. And you were or are a certified beer judge. I know you had your beer business. Can you talk a little bit about how that came about?
It's a real thing. Sometimes I say that and they're like, I don't believe that no, it's a real thing. We don't get paid, unfortunately, but we don't get paid in cash. We get paid in beer, which is often better than cash. Although a lot of the beers that you taste in these competitions are not the best. And that's kind of why I do it, because it's a volunteer organization and you help out home brewers who are trying to improve their beer. So there are some competitions for the professional breweries. I never did any of those. So this organization, you judge home brewing competitions. So you have people submit their beer and then you have an experienced judge give you feedback on it, and that way you can improve it. And so it was a lot of studying, long nights, staying up all night, drinking beer with your buddies. But it was actually a pretty intense exam. But yeah, it was a fun milestone to hit, and I do it every now and then.
That's interesting. Yeah, before I became a copywriter, right out of school, I worked for a company that did, believe it or not, recipe development. And one of our clients was Seagram's. And I was not in charge of that project, but those tastings were pretty crazy. And as I said, I wasn't in charge of it. I don't tolerate alcohol very well. But yeah, there were by the end of it, everyone was drunk and it was just a wild, crazy thing. But hey, if you can make a living out of it, that's great. But one of the things,
I love. That was my favorite part of brewing, was crafting the recipes. And it's if your listener is into cooking, even it's all the same stuff, right? Whether you're making beer or wine or stir fry, it's combining these different flavors to get a certain end outcome. It's really cool and often overlooked.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I think being you probably became a beer judge after you had you were brewing beer yourself, correct? And then you began marketing. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that and how it came to pass that you started doing marketing and realizing how hard it was?
Sure. Yeah. And the beer story leads into the marketing story. So it's a good segue. Yeah. I got into beer brewing with my roommate in college. And then after college, I had my full-time career, wanted to eventually leave that career and do my own thing. And beer was my bridge out of that. So I said, hey, well, I know this homebrewing thing, and I tend to geek out on topics, Linda, and go really deep into them. So, and I love to teach too. So I started teaching online. I had a blog where I would write about brewing beer styles, beer history, beer culture, tasting notes, all these things, and developed an audience. People started to come to the website and follow me on social media and subscribe to the emails and everything. And then I launched my first online course. And that was my first experience doing marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of my background my undergrad is in science and technology. And then I got my MBA, my master's in business. So I was doing in my career business in a scientific field. But the business that I had learned it was intended for people who were going to go work for big companies. It was intended for people who were doing marketing at a high level for Walmart and Target, Apple, these companies, right? Not for a solopreneur who wants to sell his $49 beer brewing course over the internet. And so I didn't have those skills, and I was never taught things like copywriting, which you know very well. And so I discovered that was a roadblock for me to leave my career, was that I didn't know how to sell and how to sell something online, how to do marketing. But like I did with beer, I really geeked out on it. I dove into it and eventually figured out. And after a number of years, was able to leave that job and run my beer brewing website full time.
So how did you learn copywriting? Was it hit or miss? Did you study at that point with copywriters, or how did you learn it?
I studied the greats. I eventually hired a coach who I know that you know, David Garfinkel,
Mm-hmm.
and he mentored me for a year, and that was really intense. But it was mainly studying the greats. You know, I'm a big fan of history, and I think that there's a lot of I write about this a lot. I think there's a lot of ancient wisdom that we've forgotten that could be useful today. And so I dove into people like Gary Halbert, into David Ogilvy, you know, the people that, if your listener knows the show Mad Men, I'm sure they do, and Don Draper, right? People that like he was based on. And so that, and it was like this whole new world of business that I didn't even know existed. I always thought that copyright was a legal term, you know, copyright with an R. It's like, no, it's a form of writing. It's essentially salesmanship in print. And it's really interesting. And, you know, I got really into you read those old sales letters, and they're entertaining to read too. And it's some of the best writing that you can find. And, you know, and then combine the writing with the commercial aspect of it, the venture creation aspect of it, the selling products and building businesses and all of that. It brought together a lot of interest that I already had. And so I was just hooked on it after that.
It's interesting that you bring that up with the I consider them like legendary copywriters. In fact, I have a solo podcast going to drop today where I talk about the 7 legendary copywriters, including the ones you mentioned, and how would they write, like my background is health and fitness, and how would they write like a health and fitness ad. And I was able to find some, screenshots I took of some of the ones I found, but I'm sure you know about the Eugene Schwartz, Schlitz story.
Oh yeah.
He toured the factories and it was told, oh, this is, you know, how we clean the pipe, whatever it was, the process that they had. And the person, I don't know if it was the CEO of the company, who said, you know, well, all of our competitors do that. He says, yeah, but they're not talking about it. And that's one of the things that, you know, catapulted Schlitz to like number 1 because of his copy based on something everyone else does, but no one else is talking about, that he just made super special. This is, you know, how we purify. I forget what words he used, but that, you know, those sorts of things
are extra sanitized. Yeah, the yeast is this very pure yeast. You have all the best microbiologists in a laboratory purifying the yeast. These artisanal wells. Oh yeah. Well, you know, if a story combines copywriting and beer, I'm definitely going to know it. So I love that you use the Schlitz example, and and that what he did in that copywriting. I mean, that really informed my work. I mean, I have this messaging framework, the 5 light bulbs, and that is light bulb 3. It represents your approach, your process, the way that you achieve the outcome that you promise. And so, so those kinds of lessons, right, which are just what I've found to be higher leverage than a lot of the advice that's given today, which is mainly around software and tactics and technology and all that. So that's really what I discovered from studying these old greats, was that they weren't distracted by these shiny objects, and they couldn't send an email. They had to actually type that thing out and print it and put it into an envelope and put a stamp on it and mail it and get it delivered and get it open and get it responded to. And so what you find is that when you have those kind of constraints on you, and that's how you have to sell, their words became very good because that's all they had, right? They went to the highest leverage stuff because they didn't have the easy way out where they could just blast off an email and be very wasteful about it. They couldn't waste anything. And so what I found was that it's like the things that you mentioned, the Schlitz story. It's these big ideas that really move the needle in marketing. So when I was trying to get the beer website off the ground, I ran into the same problem where I was distracted by all these shiny objects, and I would spend like a whole day or even a week fiddling with some WordPress plugin. And then on Friday, I'm like, did I really blow a whole week just trying to get this stupid caching plugin is this even going to make a difference? Right. And so what I found was a disconnect between myself and also eventually my clients, between what was important and what we were spending our time on.
Yeah.
And everyone's spending their time. Everyone wants better marketing results, but everyone's time is being spent on these shiny objects and software and all these marketing channels and tactics instead of what really matters, which are these messaging concepts, these big ideas, things like the Dos Equis guy, or we mentioned David Ogilvy, the Rolls Royce ad, the Beetle ad, right? The famous lemon ad. Those concepts, messaging, those are far bigger needle movers than where that Volkswagen ad shows up, whether it's on a TV commercial or a newspaper. That's more at the margins. It's not what really difference in those campaigns.
I always wish I could have been a fly on the wall for some of those campaigns, like how they came up with it. Like, was it a sudden, like, this is it moment, or was it just gradual, and how many people were involved? Like, I don't know any of that backstory. Do you know any of the stories behind some of this? I mean, the Schlitz one I know, but.
Yeah, there's some, like some of Ogilvy's books, you know, he says about, so in the copywriting world, you know, they have this, it's kind of like the holy grail, and they call it the big idea.
Yeah.
And they say that it really is the holy grail. Nothing else matters. If you stumble across a big idea, fortunes await you. And what you also hear about big ideas is that they're extremely rare,
right?
And they're extremely hard to come up with. So they're kind of useless. You're like, okay, well, that's great if a big idea hits me in the middle of the night, but in the meantime, I got bills to pay. I need like some fundamentals, right? So, you know, that's what I found is I found those two things to be true. That one, these ideas, these messaging ideas, are really what are most important, and we should spend more of our time thinking about our messaging. That's why now, like, I consider myself a T-shaped marketer, where I have a broad set of skills, but my specialty is in messaging. And the reason why I specialize in messaging is because it's the biggest needle mover.
Right.
And I also know that most of the advice out there around coming up with your big idea and creating your messaging and all that, I found it to be severely lacking. And also, I don't want to rely on just like an idea hitting me in the middle of the night. So I tried to develop more of a formula to creating your core marketing message. Now, you're always going to have these genius outliers, right? Like the Steve Jobs and like some of these brilliant copywriters. And, you know, you just can't replicate some of that stuff, some of the ideas that they have. I don't know where they get them from. But that doesn't mean that we can't follow more. We can't have, you know, for the average business owner wearing a marketing hat, or just, you know, a normal everyday copywriter, not a Eugene Schwartz. My question was, how do you can we come up with more of a formula for creating this core messaging that is really effective to bring us our dream clients and customers?
Is that your 5 light bulbs?
It's my attempt at it. Yeah, it's my attempt at it. I can go through that if your listener is wanting to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you could spend like a whole hour just on that, but kind of just a synopsis, because I do have other questions for you. But just because you did mention the 3rd light bulb earlier, so people know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So let me run through it real quick for your listeners. So light bulb 1. So this is, as you're listening to this, you might run your own messaging through it, and that might be your website or some emails, an email sequence that you sent, and ask yourself, am I hitting the light bulbs? So light bulb 1 is your customer's status quo. So that's where they have a problem. So that's the language of empathy. It's using the word you as in you prospect or customer instead of the word I or we, the company. And you want to give voice to that light bulb. So you want to ask yourself, am I checking the box on light bulb 1? Light bulb 2 represents the other options that they have to solve that problem. So you are probably not the only game in town. They've at least, your prospects, considered other options, tried other options, or they're being tempted by another option right now. It might be your competitor running an ad to them. And what you want to do is not ignore those, even though that's, you know, it might seem counterintuitive. I don't want to talk about my competitors. If you do this right, you give voice to those and you show why they might choose that competitor or why not. And if your targeting is good, then you're the right person to help them. And you've invalidated these other options for them. And so that's where you want to present your light bulb 3. And that's what I was saying earlier, which Claude Hopkins walked through with the Schlitz example, which was outlining their unique approach, even though it wasn't that unique, as we learned, right? That's the cool thing about this. It doesn't need to be that unique for light bulb 3, but outlining your unique approach to solving the problem, which is different than your product. Your product is light bulb 4, spoiler alert, that's light bulb 4. That's just a vehicle for your light bulb 3. Light bulb 4 is a vehicle for your light bulb 3. Your product is just a vehicle for your approach. So the approach for the Schlitz Brewery was how they sanitized the bottles. The product was, hey, a 6-pack of these bottles is going to cost $3 and you get this t-shirt that goes along with it, right? That's light bulb 4, the offer. And then finally, that leads to light bulb 5, which is, we call it your customer's new life. And this is why they buy in the first place. This is the purpose of your product. What does it do for them? What does success look like with your product or service? So
I love that.
Those are the 5 light bulbs.
It's sort of like, PAS, the problem, agitation, solution formulas, only 3 steps, but it almost sounds like this follows that loosely. Would that be accurate? Like you have the problem, which you say the status quo, which is, in my opinion, the hardest thing to get people out of, because it's so easy to just slip back into, you know what, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I don't need a solution. But do you feel that that's sort of a similar framework?
What I wanted to, yes, with some key distinctions. What I wanted to create was, again, I have a science background and I worked for an engineering company. And we always think in terms of leverage. So how can you get more bang for your buck? And what I saw was that my clients, when they went to create marketing assets like emails and sales pages and websites, would just jump right into creating those things. And they might use the problem, agitate, solve even in writing those things. Now, compare that to how people go about branding. Typically, you create an upfront brand manual. And then when you go to create your marketing assets, like your Facebook page, your website and all that, you pull from the brand manual.
Right.
And so I really created the 5 light bulbs to be like that brand manual, but for your persuasive messaging. So the first thing we do with it is use it to create what we call your core message. And that's where you do flesh out your 5 light bulbs. And yeah, it does loosely resemble problem, agitate, solve. It's kind of like problem. It's a very intuitive way to look at it. It's the decision-making process. Like I got a problem. I got different solutions ahead of me. Okay, that looks like the right solution for me. What's it going to take to implement that solution? That's the offer. That's the money exchange, right? And then there's the thing that solution gives me. So it mirrors the 5 light bulbs. It's very intuitive because it mirrors that decision-making process, whether it's for a product or it might be for a direction in your business. You can use the 5 light bulbs for anything. I joke around that you can use it for relationships even. Like you could use the 5 light bulbs. The 5 light bulbs for couples will maybe be a future book of mine. Right. So it's used for creating that core messaging, but it can also be used when you're in the act of writing that sales page. It can be an outline for that sales page as well. So we'll say things like, hey, try a light bulb 3 headline on that sales page, or try a light bulb 1 with a light bulb 5, things like that. So that's how it's structured. It's meant to be for your core messaging, but it's very flexible. It's like a Swiss Army knife. So you can create your core messaging with it, and you can use it in the trenches when you're creating your emails and sales pages and things.
I can also see how it would fit into a funnel. The top of your funnel would be the freebies. And that's when people are just, exploring stuff and looking. And then, because I know the middle of the funnel, because I've written about this on LinkedIn a couple of times, middle of the funnels are that's the most dangerous part. People are trying to decide, is it you? Is it your competition? They're on the fence, and so you want to get them past that. I also love that it's light bulbs, because what do we associate light bulbs with, right? It's like this bright idea. And is it true? I heard you on another podcast talk about it was almost like this divine intervention or something, that it hit you out of nowhere, this light bulb moment. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, welcome to my very meta life. I had a light bulb moment about light bulbs. Yeah, it was one, and I'm not like normally like a very like woo-woo kind of person, but yeah, it definitely felt like that. Like it was divine intervention. Yeah, like it was an idea that was just given to me, and then it was just up to me to kind of grab it out of the air and put it down on paper. But I also hear about the creative process, and that's a very normal pattern where by that time, this was a few years ago, I had been in the trenches of marketing for 10 years and had really studied it in depth. And I from reading about the creative process, that's how it goes, where you find simplicity on the other side of complexity.
Right.
And so from all these little details that I had absorbed, it kind of all rolled up into this very simple but compressed, and that's the key word, compressed framework. And you find that there's 2 types of simple. There's the things that are simplistic and are very shallow and flimsy. And then there's the things that are simple and have depth to them, and that you can
Right.
just peel back the layers and peel back the layers. And I believe that's what the 5 light bulbs is, because we've been in the trenches of this thing with the 5 light bulbs for years now, and I'm still discovering new things about it. So yeah, I mean, it's meant to help people with marketing, which is a tough discipline for most people, even professional marketers.
Yeah. And it seems like it's an easy thing. Like people think about that with copywriting too, which is like, it's still considered a soft skill, especially now with AI. Well, why do we need to hire copywriters? But yet AI can't do the empathy. It doesn't have stories. It doesn't, what are they going to start with? One day I was a bucket of bolts and like the next day I was a computer. I don't know. But what I wanted to ask you is the messaging and copywriting. How do you what's the difference? Because I hear the two terms used almost interchangeably. How would you define messaging versus copywriting, or how do the two work together? Or do you see them as the same?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if there is an official definition, or who would even publish that official definition. So I just kind of look at it from, okay, what's useful for our purposes in defining these things. And my definition, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about this. And I talk about this more in the book. That I use this my book, Simple Marketing for Smart People. Shameless plug. But there's a metaphor in there that I use that will be helpful here, which is this upstream downstream metaphor. And so what I say is, in marketing, what you want to do is first create your core message, which is upstream, and then what you do is you distribute it downstream to all your different marketing channels. So you first define your core message, and our favorite way of doing that is using the 5 light bulbs, which I just ran through. Once you know what your 5 light bulbs are, okay, now you can run your Facebook ads or send out those emails or whatever it is. So I would define messaging as that core message. And when I use the term copywriting, it's typically when it's taking place downstream in writing that sales page. So I might say something like, pull from your core message and then go put that copy onto your sales page. That's how I use it in our everyday.
That makes sense. Would you say, and I don't know why I'm digging into this so much, just I have this thing about because a lot of people call themselves messaging strategists. And so that's why I want to make sure that, people know not anyone can do what you do or what, copywriting does. Is it a value proposition, your core message? Would you consider that the same? Or is it different?
So I think you're asking, what are the characteristics? Is that a characteristic of your core message, that it has a value proposition?
Yeah. Or is it the same as your core message? Because value prop, I would think, would be more of what you do, and your messaging is what you do for others. I mean, how would you separate the two?
Yeah, and there's so many marketing frameworks out there, so you kind of have to ask some of these people how they might define a value proposition. You have things like USP, unique selling proposition, which people often link with Lightbulb 3. And I get that. And that's a good way that's one way you can think about Lightbulb 3, is that it's your USP. It's your unique, I call it a unique approach. Eugene Schwartz, he would call this, we mentioned him, he would call this your unique mechanism. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like this causal agent. It's like the cause that leads to the effect. It's like the sanitizing of the bottles leads to better beer, which is what you want. So I definitely think that your core message should include a value proposition, which includes what you can do for someone and also the unique way that you do it.
What doesn't work? What do you see all the time? People are trying to come up with a core message, or even the light bulbs. Where are people making mistakes as far as in their marketing? What doesn't work?
Well, I have a lot of beef with content marketing, and a lot of my clients use content marketing. And frankly, I just don't find the advice out there about content marketing to be very useful. You read a lot of this advice and it's very circular. It's like, what is content marketing? Well, it's marketing content. That's essentially the definitions that are out there. And so, and especially in my space, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can resonate with this. If you're in the advice giving space, the information space, courses, coaching, consulting, that kind of thing, a lot of people who sell those types of products just really burn themselves out producing content, because they listen to these big companies like HubSpot tell them, well, you got to produce content. And then if you're not getting enough sales, produce more content. So I have this distinction. What I say about marketing, our approach to marketing, how the 5 light bulbs is structured, is that what you are doing when you're doing marketing is you are making an argument. Mm-hmm. You're not having an argument. It's not like a heated argument. You might phrase it as you're putting forth an argument. you're taking a position on something. You're
Right.
taking a stand on something. Just like I'm taking a stand, right? Like I'm arguing for the value of core messaging over these other things like downstream marketing channels and tactics. So you put forth an argument, and then that argument shows up throughout all your marketing material. That's what you're presenting on your sales page and everything. And so if you do that, then you're not taking this what I call the topic-based approach, which is what most people do when they do content marketing, which is simply write about their topic and all the subtopics and themes and everything.
Right.
It's a flip, and I would advise your listener to make that flip too. If they find that, like a lot of people, that all your content marketing is only bringing you like tire kickers and people seeking freebies and who aren't buying from you, that might be because you're just writing about your topic instead of making an argument.
That's a great point. Yeah, I had a copywriting coach tell me that one of the best ways to engage people, especially like on a social media post, is to start an argument. But I think she meant it more of actually starting an argument, because people will on social media. But you're saying just take a stance, which is a little bit different. Like you're not.
Yeah, it's not one of those like, what do they call it? Not clickbait. There's a term for that now. Engagement bait, I think they call it. Engagement
really?
bait. Yeah. Yeah, it's like just be polarizing or controversial and all that. No. This has to do with a core argument that is within your core messaging. So what do you stand for? If you want to see good examples of this, go to Barnes & Noble and go to the business book section. And all those business books, those nonfiction books, their covers are just popping with their argument or their Lightbulb 3. So you see books like Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Right.
We would call it Atomic Habits is James Clear's Lightbulb 3. It's his system. And he's making the argument. He's making the argument that the key to achieving what you say that you want in life, which is more happiness, more peace, less stress, the key to that is developing habits, and not just any type of habit system, but the atomic habit system. So that informs all of his marketing when you start with that argument. So that might be tough. That doesn't mean you need to have like a James Clear Barnes & Noble book cover polished kind of an argument, but that's also the epitome of it too, right? Like not many people are going to get there, but it's the aim that matters, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have an argument. You should, and then maybe one day you polish it into something like an Atomic Habits, but you'll make money along the way.
I love what you said about it, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about my own messaging and what I'm putting out there as a copywriter. I specialize in health and fitness, but I'm questioning myself, which as an introvert, I'll go into my cave later today and really think about it, because that is a great point. Where am I standing for something, or am I just putting topics out on this? So how do you know the difference? Like, what is it that you would do differently? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot to that question, but
yeah, and this is where I think studying, like I started studying philosophy, and I found that, and now I would recommend that for all copywriters. That should be the first thing you study is philosophy, because within that you learn the tools of argumentation. And so the way that we define an argument is that it's comprised of two main parts, which is one, making claims, and two, backing those up with proof. So your argument should have claims in it. And just like my claim that messaging is the highest leverage activity in marketing, and I back or having a core message is important, right? So that's a claim that I'm making. Having a core message is important. And you, Linda, and your listener might fill in that blank. What blank is important? What is important in your field? When I worked I had a photography client, he would always stress that composition is most important. All his customers and audience, they thought that having a nice camera, the most expensive camera, was most important. He would argue, and did argue, that no, having an eye for composition and working with light and all these things are important. But he couldn't just assume that. He had to actually say that. And so the formula for that is you make the claim, composition is important in photography. And then what does a claim demand? It demands proof. And then you back that up with proof. And there's all sorts of proof. You can use authority quotes. You can use just logical reasoning. You can use demonstration, social proof.
Right.
And so that's how, does that help? So that's how we approach marketing as an argument, supported by claims and proof.
Because I think like when you're with your example of photography, people just want to be able to buy a new camera. It's like when I used to do in-home personal training and people just figure I bought the equipment, I'm practically in shape. It's like, no, there's so much more. You can't just buy a treadmill and expect it to work. There's a whole lifestyle behind it. And that's something that people tend to, they want that quick fix. They want one solution and just let me buy something and I'm set. But what you're talking about, it sounds like it's more, well, with the photography example, at least it's, learning composition is not something you can just, flip a switch and you got it. I mean, you're gonna have to study it. You're gonna have to probably take some classes on it and experiment. It's not for someone who's really not interested in going further. I mean, that's my take on that. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And have you had, I'm sure the answer is yes, clients in the past who just didn't know what they didn't know?
Oh yeah. All the time. Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it's with health and fitness, there's so much misinformation out there. It's insane. I told somebody recently, when I want to entertain myself, I go on Facebook and look at the ads for fitness and the exercises. And I'm like, and I'm quadruple certified. I was doing it for like 20 years. And so I know what my stuff, and I see people doing exercises, they claim work one muscle group, where I'm saying they are not even hitting anywhere near that muscle group. Like I can just tell what they're doing. They're not, the people who are going to follow them are going to say, I'm not seeing any results. And the reason is because they're not even doing the right exercises, but that's what's out there. And so it's really tough. There's just so much to know. But this has all been super interesting. Is there anything else you wanted to say, that maybe a question I didn't ask you that you think is important for people to know about core messaging? I mean, there's a ton of stuff.
No, I like using white space too, and I think that's ending. I don't want to give too much and then dilute the main message, which listener, if you haven't gotten it, it's to create a core message, distribute it down your marketing channels. Don't get distracted by being on the latest social media platform or using the latest tactic like a countdown timer or pop-up or whatever. And in that message, take a stand. And you already are, is what I have found in my experience working with clients, is that you already believe these things. Linda, you were saying like you have certain beliefs around health and fitness, like things that you would make claims around, and put your foot down and say, I stand for that. So what I would advise your listener is to outline that, is to write that down and then start publishing your content from that place. And that is that argumentation-based approach to content marketing versus that topic-based approach. And do that for a few months and you will see the difference in sales for sure.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I have all your links to your social media I'll put in the show notes. And I think we're all set. So thank you so much for this great information. I appreciate it, Billy.
Thanks, Linda. You've been a great host. I appreciate it.